So, Chris, we've come to the section in the book that you call Breaking Out and Letting Go.
Yeah.
And a good way to open is for me to just read the first sentence from this section of the book.
Okay.
And you say this, thinking the unthinkable was the equivalent of doing the impossible. It was beyond reason for me to contemplate expressing anger without a corresponding fear of some form of retribution, usually in the form of rejection.
Yeah.
So take us on from there, Chris.
Well, I think that was very true of that time. There was this feeling of exclusion from the family and tendency to keep quiet. And the safest place for me was to sit on the fence and not step down on either side. Either side was the gold mine of a blow-up, an explosion. So I had to keep very quiet. That's what it felt like at that time. And I'd entered this period, the second half of the book, where we're entering the thinking the unknowable. And this unknowable is the thing you've just quoted there. It's the equivalent of the impossible. But that's where I had to go. And as the opening picture I put into the book, I will now walk over to in a moment, just talk about it briefly. Right here, if I may, here. This picture here, which I call Bursting Forth, the Regeneration. And I'm in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And you get fairly big explosions. I never saw one of this side. I wish I had. I knew there was one close at hand, but I was described, I had photographs taken. And I'd got a large form, you might just make it out, of a figure that seems to rise out of the land. And it's a feminine form, I think. We've got the face here, an eye, and a great head up here, the moon behind, a hand down, and he's giving birth to the child. So it's a reborn, and this is what this period is about. We're going into a rather dark period now of the book, regeneration. And then across the road, the next picture is this abstract. Now, you know my picture work is rarely of that nature. Very few abstract paintings. But if you look closely, you might see a form. One here I see, there's a figure looking down this way. Or you might see a white coat and someone stretching out with a head. That could be a figure of a soldier in that direction. There are images one can find in it, or you can turn it upside down and find other figures.
It's a very busy picture, Chris.
It is.
For you.
For me it is,
yes.
Yeah. Now, I do a series of these occasionally, but they're pretty rare.
Yeah.
First abstract. So the first 2 pages of this book on thinking about the unknowable. And then the next one, we turn a page and we come to the first picture here. Now in this black and white picture there's nothing to be seen, so I have to show this one. Just turn it slightly. And this is me in a very black mood indeed. I don't think it's a darker place than this, where I'm putting my hand and I've got my mouth wide open. And look, though, I'm going to put it in like a great fistful into there.
Yeah, you call it in the book a vision of self-made hell.
That's right. Well, that's a good word, isn't it? Hell, then. So that's what hell's like. But I'm nevertheless, some part of myself, no, I'm not going to eat my hand. On the other hand, I pull it away. So that was the vision. It's a pretty dark place, as you can see. And then the images that accompany that, I'll sit down again. Here's one of the first, an image of myself, head thrust forward, fists with little eyes on it, and all parts of it suggest violence. And I'm kicking up a stink here, everything's... And this is a kind of retreat action, really. It's not an attack at all, but it looks like an action. It's a form of self-defense. So a series like that, and then I'm reborn. Here I am as a child. And I call it Monsters of Rage, nice large letters. You can't mistake it. I'm really angry. I'm spitting fits. I've got a great crocodile with the mouth wide open. Also got the boot of a person. So what is it? And what's this? A form hanging down with 2 tits, and goodness knows what above, and then another form of great hand. So it's not a happy place, as you can imagine.
And what strikes me about all of these images at this section of the book, they're all in this black and white ink wash. They've all got a sort of darkness embodied within the painting itself. So it's a time when you were not using so much colour?
I think that was probably true, except this one was coloured. That just happened to come out black and white in that print.
It's an extremely dark image,
Yeah.
even in its coloured form.
Yeah, so this takes me back to the next page. And here, I want you to look at this image, if we can get in closely to it, which I call the prisoner. And I better tell you now, this is my age. I'm now about 9 years old. Now I'm going into hospital with an acute state of constipation. So if I can't pass it, something's seriously wrong. It could be considered what we call retention, but it wasn't a nice place. And I was there for 12 weeks. So it must have been more than just a case of constipation. But while I was in this cot, it was a very dark place indeed. And here's the sort of image it came out of it. Now this is much nearer the age when I'm about 10. Here I seem a little bit younger. And you can see how tense I am. Straight arms, very pulled tight, hands overcrossed.
Yeah.
Very angry expression, not a happy place.
You call it repressed anger in the book.
It
And
is.
it's the first time I've seen this image in colour, because in the book, of course, it's reproduced.
It is,
in black
yes.
and white.
I showed it in black and white then. And here's another little drawing. Tense hands again, stretched out, and really nasty little face, screwed up. What an unpleasant place to be. Little quick sketches around it, indicating that mood. But going back to the figure here, where I'm all screwed up, I'm envisaging things outside the cage. There's water flowing down here around it. That seems a better place to be. I should explain at this time, we're going back to 1936, five or six roughly, when visiting of hospital was 1 day a week for everybody. So my mother could visit just on the Sunday. So it was a great big gap of no parents. You can imagine what that might do or feel like for kids.
Yes, especially 12 consecutive weeks of it.
Yes, you can imagine.
Yeah.
So it brought me to me thinking it's time to do a drawing. I'm now moving up in age, but I'm going back in ideas. Same picture, but here I'm in the cot and I'm looking rather young again. Views outside the window, little scenes. Here's Mum coming to visit. There's a sort of trail leading in, very small. Little things, 2 great trees, a bird flying over, and the shape of the great cot. The cot seemed enormous at that time, perhaps just to keep me in. I'm sure I wasn't in it all the time, but it felt as though I was, and I was never coming out of the damn place. It wasn't a happy place. So this was the picture that was to lead to a very important one that followed. But I'll have to go back for a moment to this one. This was one of our opening pictures on the first day, and I talked about the breakdown day. We're going back 24 years roughly from this image. And I pointed out there's one figure in it I couldn't figure out at all. There he is. I couldn't give him a name, but at the same time as drawing that, I came up with another drawing around the time. I did a series of drawings of this. There's the head.
Yeah, and we've seen this
Now
one
here he is now,
earlier. There
much
he is
further
again,
on.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's now got a body. That bit of spine going down now becomes a complete figure. And he's a spooky guy. I mean, he's got no flesh on him, but he's got an odd appendage here. He's got 2 horns sticking out. And I thought, what on earth is this? And then I recognised him after many years of what he really was. He was a sort of Joker figure. So I gave him the name, the Joker.
And if you recall, when we've, over the last few recording sessions, we've seen the Joker emerging in different phases of your work, often unidentified, unlabelled as the Joker.
Right.
But often there's a presence of the Joker almost running throughout the whole body of work that you've produced. And as you say, towards the end, it takes on a clearer and clearer or more defined form.
I think it became more clarified as time went on. But I think if you're in the middle of something, you don't always see it. You have a blind spot. And the awareness gradually sharpened up as the weeks went by and the months went by.
And to what extent, Chris, do you attribute the emergence of the Joker to the discussions with Claire through the dream therapy.
And that came out. There was one drawing, you'd have to find the first page, where I'm crowded up with the woman. I don't know if you could find it right at the beginning of the Joker series, where I get another picture out. The first page of the Joker. You passed it. No, I mean way back. That way. No, there we are. No, that's it. At the bottom. If you could hold that up.
Yeah. We discussed this last week.
And here was the mood. I'm sitting, screwed up, little tears in my eyes, and I'm a man of 50 plus or whatever, and I'm in a right old state, and not looking at all happy. And in a way, it echoes what's going on here, but in a totally different way. This is the real world, and I had to face it. So that was the image that came up from this picture and the other one. And this drawing grew out of the little picture we're looking at here, this one. Mm-hmm. Now we're moving on from that picture to this, and we'll try and hold it alongside, or I think we'll hold this up and put up this one.
I can hold that.
And this is a big one, if you can hold it vertical.
Now this, in a sense, is the defining image in your book, isn't it?
Yes, does that show well? Yes, now this is the image we're talking about. This is the Joker himself. And let's see how he developed from the drawing. You see, very much of it is exactly the same before. The little figure screwed up, his head, the outline of the bed in which I'm occupying, some of the items outside, 2 trees, and some little shrubs inside, and Mother, in this case, going away, and the track from which he came. So the image in the centre is identical to this, really, very close to it anyway. And it's become the central part of the Joker's face, as we can see. It's been lightened up. The trees have become the outline of the body, and the face seems to have grown out of the lower part here, and he's complete as the Joker. At least I saw him clearly like that. And I had to give him a title, so I called him the childhood of the Joker. And why the Joker? The Joker can have all sorts of names. He can be merry fellow. You can think endless names for the Joker. Playing cards, how he can change his spot. He can be a Joker one day, the king, then the queen, and then the jack, and be all sorts of characters.
I'm going to move him down to there, so that he's
Let's leave him there.
part of us for the...
And now, when I decided on the title for the book, this became the frontispiece for the book itself, went inside, many years later, of course, and then when I had to do the cover for the book, I chose to show him again in a different guise. He was no longer just a little figure curled up, he was the complete man, or woman, or whatever you want to call him. He has the face of a fish, a long thin neck, very dapper outfit, a little bow tie, arms coming down. And as we come down the figure, we find he's only got one leg, and the hooves, parted hooves, he's standing firmly on that. Instead of having another foot, he has a wing of a fish. He has a human hand. And this side, what on earth's he got here? What sort of creature's that, with little spines on it? He's a dapper fella with a pair of specs, and he's got 2 holding, he's a clown, isn't he? He's come out from behind the audience. A performer. He's just trying, here I am, this is me, the Joker, and I give it a name. Then I make a rather bold statement, the transformation through art and dream. So the dream work is in the book. The dream is contained within the book, but is on a so pretty different section altogether. So that's the story of the Joker, the introduction of him. And he never left me after that. He was to reappear many, many times later. And we gave him a name. I gave him a name as well as that. I call him the Unknown. And this was after someone I greatly admired as a painter called Sutherland, Graham Sutherland. And he calls his book, little book, The Unknown Book of Himself, and it's published by, should I put a publisher's name in here?
Yes, why not?
Goldmark.
Yes, it's still available.
It's still available. It's a fairly new book.
And it's quite cheap, actually. I think it's £9.
It's not very
a bad
expensive.
price for it.
But in there you've got
a
drawings
book.
not unlike my sort of work. That's how he thought. He was seeing images and he called them the unknown.
Yes.
And he said the unknown is just as real as the known. That's a rather...
And that image is actually very similar to the abstract one that you showed us earlier, that one of the few of yours that is very busy in it as an abstract.
Do you mean the
form.
one behind you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so sometimes you have to draw like that. It's the only way out. You can't just do a straight drawing. So there he is, and now he remained. He's been with me ever since, and he's not going to go away. Although near the back of the book, as we'll see later, there's just a glimpse that he might depart from me, but he doesn't. So let's put him aside and turn a page. There he is, still in the days, the early days, and we're going to move forward. There's a few images that are a bit startling. We're still in the dark area. Here's the top one. I've got a title to it here. Can you read that out, Patrick, what it says on the first line for me?
The enraged boy. Like a suit of armour, the angry facial expression protects the boy from external and internal fears.
Yes, and there I am, screwed up, looking down, and someone's got to thump me, and just see, he's getting all ready to give me a bloody big thump.
Yeah.
And that's not a very happy place.
I'll knock your head off, you little sod.
That's right, that's what it felt like. And we go down a page, and I become a little rebellious, and I'm kicking out. I'm not just standing still and looking down, I'm not going to take that. And the big ogre-like figure up there is bemused. And
yes, you bring the father figure in here. You say the father is shocked to find his son retaliate if his freedom is curtailed.
yes, he's angry with me now.
Yes, the confrontation implies independence.
Yes, so that's the stepping out from the totally negative place. And then we look at another picture, not unlike these. I'll turn it on its side. And I'm taking on a totally new role. I'm more aggressive now. I'm striding forth. I've got an easel up. I've got my paintbrush up beside. And I'm striding forth with paws. It must be a cat or something like this. So here's the stepping forward out of the total gloom.
Yes.
Or so I felt.
You actually say express anger, not retain it. And then later, anger becomes a creative generator.
Good one. Yes, that's how I felt it very much. And on the other page here, going back actually, I've got this a little earlier, there's the enraged boy really shouting his head off, and another version of it with great teeth. There are all these moments of rage, and I've got a few extra eyes here. It seems to be explosion of form coming and going. An extraordinary picture, that one, I thought.
Quite a difficult part of the book, isn't it, Chris?
It's a very unpleasant, painful part of the book, let's call it that.
Yeah.
And then we come to an extraordinary pair of pictures. The one at the top, it just says mother and child. Well, good heavens. She's looking in a terrible state of mind up there. And the boy down below, he seems to be held together just, and that is a pretty unpleasant spot to be. And underneath it, what the hell's going on? I'm all screwed up, and I seem to have produced a child sticking out. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I've decided no ladies are available, I'll produce my own child. So he pours forth, as somebody said, it's a bloody big masturbation. But that's the mood. And in fact, it's meant to be the idea of a birth. You produce your own child.
Yes. Was that in any way tied up with the dream work, or is this something that came out quite independently?
No, it's one of those things, a bit like the Joker himself when they told it just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's one of those, it's a pretty...
And it's only in hindsight that you see there's actually quite a profound...
Well, it is, isn't
process.
it? Yes. I've got Eve on the other side of the water,
Yeah.
just watching on, totally indifferent.
Very disturbing image in many respects, isn't it?
Yes, but let's turn the page and we find an even more disturbing one.
Yes.
Perhaps. I'm being ridden by a woman astride me, and I'm looking pretty fearsome down below, aren't I? Screwed up, teeth of a sense of rage, and she's saying, "Ride 'em, cowboy," and she's in charge. So that's the negative image that I produce from that section. And that closes the section of the book. There were one or two other drawings, but it lengthens out rather. So I think that's the end of that sequence.
Chris, the next section of the book.
Would you like to just slot it behind you?
With a lot of
Well,
bird
I sit on it?
imagery.
Is that all right?
But
That's absolutely fine.
Right.
now this bird section is quite a big section, isn't it?
It is really.
It's worth taking a digression just to explain that.
I
because in some
haven't
respects
got
it
all of
doesn't
them by
fit
any means.
fully with the theme,
No, I've
but
got
it's
the opening
nevertheless a
one.
very
I haven't got the
important
very
moment
first
in your
one.
own
If you want to
work.
take
And
me from any
that's
bits
this
that I've
image that you
overlooked,
produced
that's
for Bradford
fine.
University.
Yes.
Sculpture.
Yes, this is my brother, just a few months younger than me, who became the founder member of the Police Library of Exeter, of Bradford. And I've built a piece of hard-made sculpture, two wings extended this way, and a suspended form above of a bird of peace. That was his theme. And you can see it's quite a large image. It stands about that tall, quite an image. And that introduces the whole idea of the
And it's a
joke.
memorial piece, isn't it?
It's a memorial to David, yes, who was died from wounds of the back, and he was in bed for 20 years. And he devoted his time to working on this peace library.
Was the library still
And it's still
available
running,
at
yes.
Bradford
And the
University?
courses are being run there for peace study.
A little different.
Yes.
And it's worth taking a digression. Just
So-
okay, so that opens the section.
Right.
Fully with the theme, but it's nevertheless a
And I've
very
got two
important moment
images
in
on the
your own
page. One I am
work.
showing
And that's this image
of
that
mother,
you produced for Bradford
or
University.
possibly mother. I always call him, it, a lap. So it's got some little figures in it, like birds pecking for their meal, and she's supporting them all. So you could read it as figures with their mouths open, or as a little child at the bottom. And she's looking down, and she has two faces. One with a smile on it on the left, and a much darker figure on the right-hand side. So this ambivalence of where do I stand in all this? A difficult place. And then the next picture of me floating, and I called it the drowning. It's a memorial to David, yes, who we check that.
Yes,
Died.
drowning
The
youth.
drowning youth, there he is. And he seems to be wanted to be saved by a bird who's flying down from above. And a rather nonchalant sky above, not rather indifferent to the whole scene. But here's the bird coming down to save me from the day, and I'm holding on tight. And I think that's what that picture was about. And then moving across, I've got two images of birds, one with a little child coming out of the womb area, so to speak, him, it, and lap. So about to leave the nest.
Fledgling about to leave the
Yes,
nest.
there we are, about to leave the nest. So I want to get out of this state now. I'm taking wing. Then much later in life, I'm leaning against the rock of a building, and another bird is leaning up against me here. One with a smile on
Yes,
it on the
coastal
left.
scene.
Much
Coastal
darker
scene.
figure. Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
So these are images relating to the bird image. Turn another page. A difficult place. And I come to a very strange picture above. Me floating. Birds of Victim, I called this stretch. And I must talk a little about this bird at the top left. I'm a very young boy now. I go out to work on a farm during all the summer months. Spent a lot of time at the farm. I'm about 13, 14. Rather indifferent and to the whole scene. In those days, if you wanted to produce white fish, you strung the birds up on a line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They hung there. And then white flesh.
Yes.
And the farmer came along with a very sharp knife, and he cut out the tongue of each bird as he walked along, and it's all dripping the blood. So here's just one of the birds hanging down. They're flapping like mud here. And I'm quite a young chap, and he looks at me and he says, "You don't have to worry, they're not suffering from this really, and you'll have wonderful white meat coming off it." And I was very ambivalent about this. I thought it's quite possible you get some white meat. But I'm not sure about the flapping. I think they're going to have a lot of trouble. So that was the way you dealt with it on a farm in those days. And I decided to do a little of drawing what it felt like. Here I am, and I'm spitting the blood out. And this is a little image of me in that state of mind. or one of the images. There are others as well. I'm a very young boy
This
now.
farming was
I had
quite
to
brutal.
work on a
He-
farm.
he
He didn't think so. I mean, this is a normal thing to do. It's what you did on the farm. Just cut their tongues out. And they'll bleed. They just keep bleeding. They'll go whiter and whiter. Lovely meat afterwards. In those days, it depends how you viewed life. As a boy, it was a bit shocking to come across it first. The birds up on the line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a they hung there. And then
So the birds in your work seem to take on multiple roles, Chris. Some of them are threatening, some of them are benevolent,
yeah.
but there's this multiplicity, and in the next set of images we encounter birds as theatre.
Well, let's take the top one, which I've always enjoyed rather when drawing it. Bird theatre, I called it. We're on stage. You see a hint of theatre around it. And they seem to be dancing. They're pruning themselves. They're looking very jolly. They're having time. A lot of bright colour. Very jolly picture indeed. And then, looking below, picture second number 2, we look down and we got a totally different mood. They're dressed up. There's a little face inside this, a little hard to see. There's a man's legs, and then another figure. He's half man and half bird. His head's leaning forward, thin beaks, and what's he doing? And up at the top left corner, a very gloomy sort of figure indeed. I'm in a dark mood. I feel it's a little like an asylum, not the happiest places to be at all. Totally opposite mood to this one.
And to some extent there's this theme of mask again, isn't there? And because you could almost look at this as a mask.
Well, yes, I'm putting a thing over the top and I'm walking about. I'm a person and I am here, but I've only got a face in that one. Yes, it's an ambivalent place. And this little chap, he's looking rather bemused in the bottom right corner. So that was another mood. 2 scenes of the birds on stage, but in different guises, really. And that takes me on to a slight change of mood, a bit of uplift here. I'm looking at one of a bird that's going to take off. Here he is. A strenuous effort, and I'm taking a run and a leap. And the feeling is I'm hoping to get up there. So I'm running very hard indeed. And in the one below, finding one's space and learning to fly. And here I really am ready to take off. So there's hope of lift-off as birds do. I think, yes, that's the way it's going to go. I can lift off any time soon.
And that you take as a metaphor for, yes, literally moving on.
Yes, it's a moving on. We've got out of the complete gloom of part 1, and we're moving to, I hope, a slightly happier space.
And of course there's a big tie-in here with classical mythology, which you pick up in the book in some of the annotations.
Later. Let's turn the page slightly and look at this little image lying here. And I'm sitting with companions now. I think I'm on the edge of a cliff, looking out. It's a waiting period, I feel. I'm not sure what for. I think I give it one word, wings. And I'm thinking about wings and taking off. And alongside it, a strange little painting. Surprised Angel, it's called. The angel, in fact, this is a very gloomy, dark picture, and you probably not get it at all on the slide. There's a figure lying down at the bottom. It's a tomb place. And he's looking down with surprise and wondering what he's doing there. But I enjoyed the idea of the wings and so on. So I'm still thinking wings, constant wings. I'll turn another page, if I can get the page open. Here we are. And now, what have we got here? The embrace, I call it. This is a slight sexual connotation here, as if the creature is trying to seek help from a much larger bird. He's a rather dark figure, satanic, I believe. It's got wings. Mythology, I call it down the bottom, do I not?
No, the embrace.
The embrace.
Yes.
Yes.
Although you call it a mythological scene.
The scene to start with, yes. So these moods are swinging and changing all the time. Another one.
And just before you leave that, Chris, it's illustrated here in black and white, and indeed in the book in black and white. Was it actually a colour piece?
No, it was a black and white picture. I didn't colour that one. If I did, I've certainly lost it. It might have been the one I destroyed. It's just not impossible that I destroyed 20 pictures, which I don't think I'd touched on before. I might have done.
Yes, you have.
And
yeah.
this destroying of pictures is ridiculous, but that's what it felt like at times.
And running through this section of the book, I get the sense of this darkness in the artwork itself, not just in the subject matter, but in the palette that you're using as well.
Yes, that's possibly true. I think when you
most of your work is so colourful.
Well, sometimes, yes. This is still the dark period of the artwork, of course.
Yes.
We'll lift ourselves later. Then another figure here, enigmatic figure.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a face within a face. There seems to be a hood over, and there's a little dark face inside it. Wings taking off, or standing still. A little hard to know what he's going to do. And then to the right, another little figure walking in a great landscape, and I'm back in New Zealand briefly, looking at the far distance of the Alps, a little spouting of flame of the shooting up there. We'll touch on that a little later.
Yes, in fact, we haven't yet been to New Zealand in the grand scheme of
no,
things, so to speak.
No,
and
but only in that introduction picture.
Yes.
Yes. And then to the other side, turning it round yet again. This is a little tricky to hold. It might hold.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with other figures here a little bit. Moon goddess on the left and earth goddess here. These are creatures of mythology, of course, and we entered in that field again. And this one on the right's rather interesting. I've got the god up here, and the earth goddess here is putting out a hand, and he seems to be in sympathy. And lots of little birds around on wings and so on. And here I am lying down, and he's just about to jump on me, bring me back to life and vitality again. And that's the possibility of thought that ran through the mind there. The one on the left is really ambiguous. Here I am with a great winged bird coming out and a sleeping figure at the bottom of it.
And it's yet another birth image.
It's a bird image again. So
No,
the bird
birth.
image keeps striking.
Birth image.
Bird.
Birth.
Oh, birth image. Oh,
Yes, we've got
oh yes,
the,
because here I am lying
yes.
through, yes. And here's another image and I'm being pierced. That's a little uncertain. It's not quite the same mood. Slightly darker mood on that one, I feel. And finally on the next page, I think we're near the end of it. Now this is an important image for me. And we come here now, Patrick, to a picture of me sitting up in bed, invaded by the birds, I called it. What do I mean? Well, I'd had a bit of a nightmare that day, I think. This was part of the sequence of dream work I was going through, hoping to come out of it eventually. I sit up early in the morning and I'm fluttering. Well, I feel that's what it feels like. So I identify those as birds fluttering away. And that was in the morning. The late afternoon, I immediately decided to transform that into a painting, which I'll now raise up above. And here we have it. Think of the one we'd just seen, and I'd take a brush, fairly reasonably sized brush, and I'd draw this with a brush. This is a black and white drawing. I'll draw it round like this to start with. Then I introduce a few more lines. Then I use some pens for these lines, which are much smaller. And here I am staring out. Self-portrait, I call it. Hand up around the mouth, looking very pensive. And I'd been thinking about the birds and talking about fluttering. And thinking about that, I decided there was more to it. And I turned it through 90 degrees, and I found the two birds lying inside the portrait. A bird kicking out, and that's my moustache, of course, and up above the hair area, a little beak. Yeah, and they're having a scrap with each other. So within the birds, we have another image, this turning image.
Yeah. This is something that recurs in your work, isn't it?
Quite
the
a lot.
image within the image.
Quite often, yes.
And what I find quite intriguing about it is that the conscious you is setting out to draw one thing, the unconscious you draws something else. But they seem to merge together seamlessly. And this is an intriguing image because it's taken some time of discussion through the years with you for me to be convinced that it actually happened as an accident. I mean, you didn't set out to draw the birds.
No.
The birds were there, but the the powerful influence they exerted on the unconscious.
It's very strange, isn't it?
Yes.
I have to
it's an
say, I
extraordinary
did
image.
modify that one. That was exactly as found. This one, the head bit hadn't been complete. This part was here. This wasn't,
Yeah.
so I just
It's
included
quite
that.
extraordinary.
So
And
we
if
go
turn
back
it
for a minute,
again, there's the
There's the
image
portrait.
of the face.
and here's my
And now we can
beard,
see the
which
bird
is
very
also the
clearly.
wings of the bird stretched out. And then up here among the hairline, I saw something, and when I turned it, I was looking at that, and I thought, that's interesting. Turned it round, and gradually this bird appeared. But I modified that a bit, and this is what we called automatic drawing, common to the surrealists, and they use images like this quite a lot. And in this work, very often, they start like this. What is automatic drawing? It's a kind of doodling. You know, sometimes you pick up a phone and someone's on and won't put the phone down and you want to switch off and you're doodling away without thinking.
Yes. Yeah.
And you say, I must go now. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, and you doodle more. And when the phone puts down, you suddenly look at it and you say, good heavens, I've just drawn something. Now, this image is very like that. I had to modify it a bit. And this is, you come out of the semi-conscious state and you just tickle it a bit and it becomes what it is, and it's another bird. So that's how that came about, you see.
Yeah. Yes, a remarkable image.
Right, end of story, that one. And now we're going to New Zealand. You broke for the moment.